And we are now starting in, it is our final panel already. I can't believe it, time flies by. We're trying to wrap it all together and bring all the topics that we have been discussing today together in one final discussion. We'll discuss fairness in personalization, the role of transparency, and the balance between interests. And please join me in welcoming my amazing panelists today. It's Cecilia Alvarez-Rigaudios. She's EMEA Privacy Policy Director at Facebook Meta. Dr. Stefanie Beckmann, she is joining us from the Seven.One Entertainment Group. She's the Director of the Digital Media Ecosystem. Professor Dr. Max von Grafenstein is with us also. He's a professor at the UDK and the Humboldt Institute for Internet Law and Innovation Technology. It's quite a long title, Max. And Michael Will is also with us. He's the president of the Bavarian State Office for Data Protection. Welcome. Thank you all for taking the time. It's quite a large and diverse topic, so I think we'll just try to pose a general question, and then you're invited to offer your specific perspectives on what we're trying to discuss here. And let's start with the fairness and transparency dimension of the question: how can personalization really work in practice in the future? Because it often boils down to choosing the appropriate legal basis, obviously, for running a data-driven business model. And I bet there are a lot of different perspectives on that question here gathered at the table. Let's start, Stefanie, let's start with you. How did the discussion go at Seven.One internally? Was it an issue? Are there ongoing projects to tackle the fairness and transparency dimension of personalization?
Sure. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you so much for having us. Apart from being at ProSieben, I'm also in the board of directors of the IRB Europe. So I kind of have a perspective on choosing legal basis, which is, of course, consent or a user's choice then. And so let me think, for us as ProSieben, let me explain our situation. So on the one hand, we are a publisher, but at the same time of being a publisher as my major hat, there is also more roles that I'm taking, because we also have a full edtech stack. And also we have marketing colleagues who, for example, run dating apps. So they're also on the buy side. So I basically have the full range of excitement, being sell side, buy side, and edtech. And all these kind of maneuvers I try to coordinate for ProSieben. So this runs over 60 different assets, over at least 4 different countries. Majorly, there's a bit more, but this is the major focus for me. And then there is different DPAs that we deal with, because it's not only one, but different ones. So the complexity is immense, and talking about fairness, to me, the first prerequisite for this would be clarity. And there, I would say there is room of improvement from 2 sides. One, the executive power, how we enforced, how good is the discussion, and how clear is what we are asked to do. And the other one, even one step further, would be the judicative power to say, okay, how clear is the groundwork on which the DPAs then work. So a lot of complexity, clarity, not too big, getting better, I hope. And to me, TCF has been the safeguard. And since right now it's under scrutiny, this to me is the major problem that we're facing right now, because we not fully depend, but very much depend on TCF, and still see it as a really good legal ground.
That's a very important point to take down, obviously. So, okay, you are kind of focusing on the TCF. I bet we're all following quite closely what will happen in that regard, and maybe following up on that a bit, Cecilia, because there was obviously a lot of different case law already, and also DPA decisions on the question of what legal basis is allowed to choose, and how do you choose it? How do you ensure transparency around the process, and so on? Can you elaborate a bit on the process, on how you have been dealing with that journey?
Thank you very much, Rebecca, and thank you for Beckmann for inviting me to today and for being in this panel. Maybe I would like just to make a prior comment with respect to when we speak about the data-driven business models, because data-driven business models can mean many things, and it is not just about the business models that are financed by advertisers who are benefiting from personalized advertising. Actually, digitalization means most of the time that business models are powered by data. And this started with the Society of Information, as we call it, in the 2000s, and now is the digital society. And this explains why we are putting so much focus on AI, on creating data spaces, on facilitating access to data under the Data Act. So there is a recognition of the value of the data in how business models are progressing, and not only because of the aspect that could be related to advertising. However, it is true that the recent case law that you mentioned and DPA decisions have been specifically addressing personalized ads and the legal basis that they consider the most appropriate to conduct such processing activity under the GDPR. I believe that when we are assessing personal data processing, and in this case, the one that is needed in order to conduct personalized advertising, one shall identify the legal basis in context, where also transparency and fairness are going to play a role. And therefore, it matters what the interests are at stake with respect to the organization, with respect to the individuals, with respect to the advertisers. It matters also what the contract says with respect to how advertising is going to play a role with respect to the personalized experience, with respect to the financing of the service. It also matters the kind of safeguards that, as the case may be, an organization may have put in place. I would say that in a nutshell, as always in data protection, context matters. So it's not only personalized ads, it's personalized ads in a certain context in which you analyze all of these elements that I think are relevant. Since probably, since Meta, without the probably, has been the protagonist, I would say, of part of these decisions, let me maybe share with you the first part of the interests that are at stake that I think could be relevant also for us, for the discussion. When we analyze the business model, we analyze the Meta's, of course, legitimate interest in data protection terms of the data controller, in which these interests are connecting individuals with other people, with causes, with brands they care worldwide, to enable individuals and organizations to reach an audience of their choice and to measure the success of this reach for an affordable cost that is the one that finances the service without accessing personal data, which is also important in this case, and subject to a certain number of guardrails and user controls. With respect to the users, they also have a benefit or an interest in how this business model may work in their first private capacity, because they have a legitimate interest to exercise their fundamental freedoms of expression, of information, of reunion, and to have a unique personalized experience. And users also are acting in their professional capacity, in particular advertisers, creators, mostly in our case SMEs and sole entrepreneurs, but not only. And they have a legitimate interest also to establish and create their business or charity activities. And this is directly encompassing Article 16 of the European Charter of Fundamental Rights, which is facilitated, as this has been evidenced by research, through the ability to reach their potential audience at an affordable cost. There are other elements, such as the contractual terms, the guardrails and controls that play, I think, a very important part. But since we are just at the beginning, and I'm sure that I'm going to be able to address this later, let me stop here in order that we have the conversation going. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. Michael, let's switch the perspectives to what you are doing at the Data Protection Authority level, because for one, of course, you have the oversight of over a few companies in Bavaria that are, of course, also using personalization and went through the struggle to decide which legal basis is appropriate and all the transparency requirements, of course. But how did maybe your view change, or how is the work of the data protection authorities in general changing along with all the court cases that we are seeing?
Yes, thank you. Let me first of all use the opportunity to agree to Cecilia. It's very important that we differentiate what is the context. What are we talking about when we are talking about data-driven economy. I think we should respect this broader context, because when we look even at the discussions we had today and yesterday, we see that it's not only advertisement industry and the media industry who is data-driven. So there are so many more, beginning with all the ones who try to establish AI products. So when we are talking about data-driven economy, let's be clear that we are now talking about media and advertisement. And this is something which, from the perspective of a data protection authority, is in a certain German perspective, a matter of changes, because we had the specific situation in Europe that we missed this transmission of the privacy directive, which has entered into force only in December 2021. So we look at a phase behind us where, of course, also the data protection authorities established a logic where they saw legitimate interest as the basis of using cookies and other identifiers of other technologies to place advertisement and to design internet sites. This has completely changed since we have this transmission of the privacy directive in German law, and now we are looking at in my opinion, more clarified situation on the one hand, because it's clear that we don't have to discuss about the borderlines between legitimate interest and consent. What are the thresholds? What are the specific situations where only consent can be a legal basis? This is way. This is not more the question, but we are looking at many developments, at many companies who now are asking how to establish a stable way of consent, which leads to numerous discussions. About 1/6 of all our cases is dealing with the questions of cookie banners and anything else. And this gives me a little bit the impression that this concept that European law establishes in the privacy directive is something which is at least discussable. And for me, the situation today, and I'm completely agreeing with my experts responsible for internet law, we are missing this additional piece of legislation, the e-privacy regulation, which might have established different standards and some more ways to deal with the interest of economies Cecilia already addressed. This is for me as authority who has to enforce existing law, the beginning of the discussion. Let's continue how to work with the law we have. But when I analyze in an abstract way the situation, I have to acknowledge that at the end, the legislator has missed to react to a development in the recent years, and where the former directive and now the regulation we have is not the best answer you can give to all these challenges.
Thank you so much for these insights as well. Max, you look like you want to continue what has been said and also add upon those thoughts and maybe even add a bit of the question, how much importance should the balancing of interests and also the choices the users make have on the question of the legal basis and also on transparency maybe?
I would like, as I come to that, to your specific question, Rebecca, I would like to tie into what Herr Will said and also Cecilia Alvarez before. And I would also like to stress again that in theory, the GDPR and all data protection laws, but especially the GDPR, they don't say, hey, we disrespect the value of a data-driven economy, of data-driven innovation, not at all. Also in Article 1, Section 1, the GDPR explicitly states it's all about the free movement of data. But And then there's the interesting part. We have to do it, or data controllers have to do it in a way which is fair, transparent, and lawful. And if you take these three principles per se, I mean, it's obvious. Nobody would deny, of course, data, all social treatment should be fair and transparent and lawful. Yeah. So this is nothing what anybody amongst us would deny. But it is interesting to see that how this is applied in practice. There's quite a discrepancy. And so we have, on the one hand, big companies who really apply the free movement of data. And there it's really a real hustle to oblige them to make it transparent and fair and lawful. And then you have a many small and medium sized companies who are so scared to touch the data because of this but that there is no free movement of data at all. So this is a very big discrepancy. And I would like to stress again that it is interesting historically that this law only has established or has renewed only because we had these big companies in the beginning which did not apply these principles of fairness and transparency on their own. So there was obviously a situation where the lawmakers said, hey, this is so badly done that we need a law now so that we can really oblige them. And it is a very interesting question now, how can we do this in practice, especially with respect to personalized content and personalized advertising. And we can see that the situation has quite improved. But before I get more specific, this is just the framing I wanted to bring into this discussion beforehand.
Excellent points, Max, and maybe just follow up on that. What new approaches are there, maybe already in the market or are being developed to ensure that personalized data use and personalized data models are still being accessible are still being made accessible for users, and the business model just doesn't die in the market? Because I think we're all on the same page when I say it is a model that is absolutely needed in the market, and we're kind of still struggling to find a good legal footing for everybody. So let's talk a bit about the different approaches that we do see in the market, and maybe that will inspire some more market players to follow suit. Stefanie, should we start with you? Is there some approach in especially the content production sector that you would say really enabled the personalized products and data use, or is there something that you're seeing currently that is being developed that will help?
I think in addition to TCF, which I mentioned already, which is like marking the consent and how you can put more transparency for the end user in question if this is the case, but there is like a lot of discussions about the pure model. So the pure model means you either give consent because you want your content for free, or you need to pay for it. So this is basically like these two different directions you can take. And the second one, paying for it, means you have a subscription. We have like a huge streaming platform built up, which is Join. So either you use it with ads and targeted ads. So it's not about ads, but about targeted ads, so data usage, or you get a subscription. And here, like for us, it's becoming difficult because in general, I find this totally clear. You can explain it very well to the user that he has to pay one way or another. But for us, it becomes difficult because we have licensing agreement with the big studios like the Warner Brothers, Universal Studios, and so on. And we buy a certain license for our content. So our license that we buy usually is an advertising license. So we are obliged to have advertising in it. This advertising also has to be sold. It's not about just, showing someone ads, but nobody pays for it, like saying program hints or something like this. So in general, I do like the idea about the pure model, but for us as someone that is not owning their content as a newspaper and not having journalists who write it, but we go to studios and we have contracts with them, it makes it very difficult, especially since other people buy the other contracts. So there is obviously Amazon Video and Netflix and all these. So usually the market was kind of divided. So we buy the advertising content, someone else buys the subscription content. So this model really is difficult. And one that's even more difficult, I would say, is the three-way model, where you have like the option to pay or to give consent, or to go to the settings and not do neither and make more selections. So even, I mean, this is to me even more absurd, to be honest. So we're still looking, we're still checking what to do.
But it's interesting. So you are already mentioning like 3 options that are out there, and let's look a bit more at the pure model for all of our German participants today. You'll know what we mean. For all of our international participants, it's basically the system where you can decide whether you want to access a content free of charge, but then get personal advertising, or pay a usually standardized fee and like a certain amount for access for a specific amount of time. And there has been discussion about that model as well, quite a few years now. But there is a Data Protection Authority paper regarding this. So let's circle back to Michael Will. I'm talking about, of course, the DSK paper on the pure models. Did I understand it correctly that you, at the DPA level, you are saying the pure model is generally something that is absolutely available to the market? It's a legitimate model to get consent, but also get paid for the content that companies are producing or are offering. And what might be the requirements you also formulated to make the pure model legally certain?
Yes, thank you for coming back to this specific decision, which took a rather long time till we had established and had every sentence on the place it was supposed to be. It's one of the few situations many people seem to be satisfied with the things we do, and we are rather astonished that even our Irish colleagues said Meta is now a little bit referring to this model when discussing something new for its users. We should be very clear, and I think Stefanie has already explained it in the details, that this pure model or pure contract situation is a situation which still relies on consent in terms of GDPR. So it is a clearly yes, but recommendation. You may rely on consent, but this consent should be valid. What means it should be differentiated. It should be, as we call it, it should obey to the principles of granularity, which means in my explanation that the data subject still has the possibility to select what he is ready to give away, what kind of data processing he is ready to accept. So this is the core element of all these new models which now are established on the market. And I'm a little bit afraid that in spite of all these broad recommendations, many of these models don't meet these requirements because they don't offer as distinct possibilities as they should. We are still online? It works? Okay, fine. So I'm very happy to discuss the details, but this is the problem. And what we should respect that we don't discuss about another option, which maybe was also a little bit mentioned by Stefanie, the option to clearly decide to have data as a replacement for money. We have another option to discuss about. That's the option to have a contract about delivering certain content and to decide to pay with your data. this is a discussion which is, in my opinion, still ongoing, and which is the next legal basis, because we started in discussing about the lawfulness of processing. This is a specific arrangement which is, in my analysis, possible under GDPR, but which again will have to stick to certain conditions. And again, it will be the requirement of granularity. What means that the person who is ready to agree in a certain processing doesn't agree in it in the sense of broad consent. You can take everything you want to. It's for me a little bit compared to the situation when you would offer somebody to grab into your wallet and take out everything you want. This is not the meaning of consent or a contract on offering your data for certain purposes. Again, it has to be for the data subject understandable and selectable. So this is something which may be complicated, but which might be already a little bit established in the TCF framework, for instance. So I'm a little bit wondering whether we don't discuss about this models in a broader sense. I would be happy to hear your insights on those ideas.
Very important aspects as well, and kind of circling back to a discussion that we used to have like 2 or 3 years ago when the Digital Content Directive was like implemented into German law and really established a contract where the service is given like on the basis of data instead of money. So exactly that kind of exchange that you just mentioned. And yeah, I mean, let's ask around. Cecilia, what do you think is the pure model something that will be important for your services as well? If so, how are you like planning to launch them into the market? And yes, as Michael Will just mentioned, there are of course still requirements that need to be fulfilled even when a pure model is being used. So yeah, would be great to hear your perspective on this and your insights.
Thank you, Rebecca. I would like not necessarily to speak about something that is under discussion with the data protection authorities right now, but more to give more technical assessment with respect to what we're seeing regarding the subscription models, in particular linked to the discussion that we are having. As someone has already been mentioning before me, that the subscription models are not new, and therefore there has been a certain number of examples. It is true that in Germany lately we have had the opportunity to have data protection authorities assessing some of them, and I think that this has been relevant in order also to have takeaways with respect to elements that this subscription model may present. There are other jurisdictions in which these subscription models exist. But since we are in Germany, definitely this is something that I will focus more on takeaways that I have for my side with respect to my readings of assessments that have been made by the data protection authorities, and also by looking at what they were doing, in particular the organization. I think that something that is clear that has been said by Michael before is that the subscription model is a legitimate way to implement consent. So it's a way in which the consent finds a way to have also the recognition that, well, the businesses are not cost-free. So that is a way in which there should be a manner in which you have a business economically viable element with, in this case, the choice of the user. And I think that this is exactly what the Court of Justice decision in the Bundeskartellamt case was saying when they were referring to the subscription models more recently. Were respected to the fact that there is a recognition that you cannot be or obliged, let's say, to maintain a service without any financing. And in particular, they refer to the subscription model as something that is subject to an appropriate fee, whatever this could mean, but this is the wording that they use, as well as an equivalent alternative, which is not accompanied in this case by the data processing operations that were analyzed in the case, which are only related to behavioral advertising because of the reasons why this kind of decision was raised. So as such, since we have the subscription model linked to the consent requirements that I think Michael also was referring to when we were saying that it was distinguishable, which is something that is very characteristic to the consent, and also to the fact of the recognition that this should be an appropriate fee and an appropriate alternative, I think in my mind, my takeaways will be that we need to have a consent in this subscription model that should be unambiguous in the sense that there should be an active decision of the user with respect to the decision that needs to be taken. And I should say that a certain number of subscription models that I have seen positively assessed by German data protection authorities are actually looking for obtaining, or they are already obtaining, a consent for both cookies, for the EPD, for the e-privacy directive and GDPR, which makes a lot of sense when the purpose is unique. So in the case at hand, if we only think about behavioral ads, to have consent and GDPR together in the sense that the consent should be together, because you are not going to say yes to the cookies and no to the use if both of them are going to be used for the same thing. For me, it makes sense the way in which the data protection authorities have been assessing this, or the organizations have been proposing also this. The second element is the information, which is also key with respect to what are the principles that we were talking before, right? The transparency. So the information, in this case, I think the information is rather than looking at Article 13, I think that the assessment is more that there is a clear understanding for the individual of the choices that are offered, rather than to go line by line with respect to Article 13 that needs also to be assessed. But I think here the information is more with respect to the choices that are offered. We have the freely given element of the consent under the GDPR, and here I think that is where I find easier the equivalent service element that the Court of Justice was mentioning, in the sense that you do not necessarily offer as an alternative a service that is degraded, but that it is something that enables to have maybe a fair choice to come to our initial discussion regarding the principle of fairness and this appropriate fee. And that, of course, is something that probably is not on the the assessment from a data protection viewpoint. It will be another thing, but it doesn't matter. It's a concept that is there. And I will add something more that is, for me, relevant in all of this discussion that we are having regarding fairness, transparency, and lawfulness as three principles that needs to be together. I was mentioning before regarding Meta that the contract matters, and that the guardrails matters, and the control that we put in place for the users matters. And I really believe that this is very relevant in order to assess whether the other alternative, the alternative with the ads, is actually also fair. And this is something that, and definitely Meta has put a lot of effort along the years to have guardrails in place with respect to the advertising principles in order to avoid sensationalist advertising or discriminatory ones, community standards that are also applying to the ads in order to avoid a certain number of harmful, let's say, contents, ads included, that personal data is not sold to the advertisers, that the content of the private messages are not used in other personalized ads, that advertisers have options to target, but there are things that are restricted. So they cannot target, for example, using sensitive topics or neither sensitive categories of data. When we have right now, well, there's a lot of guardrails and then controls as well. And in particular, I would cite one which is relevant for the data protection elements regarding the consent for cookies, for third-party data that are coming from the cookies. This is also something that exists, as well as a consent that is a toggle in order to accept or not, and is an opt-in regarding the use of third-party data for behavioral ads. And there are more. But I think that this is also something that is relevant. And I finish because I know that Max wants to intervene with respect to another element of the consent, which is the revocability, which is also something that is probably important in this case, in the sense that the user is able to change his or her mind regarding the options that are offered, and understanding, of course, that it is a bit more, let's say, there is an additional step if you choose the subscription, because you at least need to enter whatever is the payment method. But apart from this, the revocability should be something that should be made easy for the individual in this case. I will stop here in order to leave the room for Max to intervene. Sorry if it took too long.
I didn't want to intervene, Cecilia. I just wanted to add another perspective on it.
Absolutely, Max, feel free, because I wanted to ask you anyway what you thought, especially on the whole consent issue. But yeah, absolutely, feel free.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Because I actually wanted to put this discussion regarding the pure model a little bit into perspective, because what this actually concerns is just a tiny bit of the whole complexity of how to apply privacy and all these principles. And in my understanding, the pure model only addresses the problem of voluntariness of the consent. Why? Because the idea behind that is, hey, my consent isn't freely given if I don't have another choice. And now the question is, hey, if you give the choice that you pay for the service, and then I don't take your data in order to personalize advertising, etc., then in theory, and this is a very reasonable argument, then the end user has a choice. Of course, now this is a very big discussion. Yeah, is this really a fair choice? And there you have the more liberal perspective. For example, the German Constitutional Court said in the Schweigepflichtentbindung case, yes, of course, that's enough. And then you have a more social, maybe socialist perspective where you say, no. This leads to the situation where only the rich people have a choice and have privacy, and the poor people don't have privacy anymore, yeah, because they can't afford it. Apart from that discussion, it's just one piece, because it doesn't say that apart from that, the data processing mustn't be transparent anymore or mustn't be fair anymore. Of course, even if there is a freely given consent, because of the poor model, for example, then still the data processing must be organized in a way which is transparent for the end users and also fair. And it's clear, because if you don't make it transparent, the consent can't be valid. Yeah. So if you don't understand as an end user what you're agreeing to, then it's null. And the same thing is with fairness. And maybe it's important to clarify very quickly what fairness actually means, because there's much confusion in it. If you go to judicial rights, then fairness doesn't mean transparency, of course, but it means that the defendant has a right to be active in these proceedings. Yeah. So it has not only a right, if I'm accused, I don't have only the right that I know what I'm accused for, but I have also the fairness principle that I can really correct wrong data, wrong information, for example, that I complement, contest it in a way. And this is exactly what the fairness principle in data protection law means, actually, that you can correct wrong data, that you can complement the view, etc. And this now comes to a very interesting discussion, because what I see here again in this discussion, there is one part which is completely left out of the equation, and this is the perspective of the real end user. So if I hear you talking, so there is a huge fight between the regulatory bodies and the economists, or the industry. But actually, it should all about the end user. The law should be for the end user, and the same, of course, the technology and the business model should be for the end user. But there is so little, I think, empirical evidence which makes really sure that the business model really is circulating around the perspective of the end user and the law in the same way. And I'll just give you an example, because we made a qualitative study addressing the quantitative study results. I think this is already a couple of years ago, where the people were asked across Europe, hey, what do you think about personalized tracking technologies and personalized content? And it was a quantitative study, so the people could only say, yes, I like it, yes, no, I don't like it at all. And 70%, if I remember correctly, said, no, I don't like it. And this was an interesting result, but we asked qualitatively then only 20 people. But with a qualitative study, we could ask them for 90 minutes, hey, why don't you like it? Or how do you find it? And if you don't like it, what's the problem? And then the answer was super clear. They said they don't understand tracking technologies. It's so opaque. It's so deceptive. And now it gets interesting for the industry. But in principle, they understand the value of personalized content and personalized advertising. And this is a huge chance for the industry, I think, to make it finally fit also with the regulatory approach. Because if you can explain the end user the whole thing in a way that they really understand what the value is, and then on the other hand, they really understand what the risk is, then they can make their judgment and come to an own conclusion. And if the business model is that way, that the value is much lower than the risk for the end user, then it's a bad thing. But if you can make it in the way that you can really convince it in a honest way that the value is much higher than the risk, then it's a good business model.
Also a very, very important aspect, Max, and I think that study that you mentioned that you did, I think that will work across board. I think if you ask, like in black and white, do you like personal data use or personalized advertising? Maybe a lot of people would kind of shy away from that and say, yeah, I don't know, maybe not. But if you go deeper and really ask why and why they don't want to be tracked or what benefits do they see, I think you get a lot more diverse answers. But I agree with you. I think it's also kind of an issue the industry needs to tackle in the following years. And maybe just we have a couple of minutes left, so maybe quick last round of questions, because the regulatory framework that we see right now is sometimes kind of interpreted restrictively, and that absolutely impacts businesses, online businesses, but also beyond. And does also affect consumers. I mean, we all know the whole cookie debate has been crazy for the last couple of years. And maybe there are also solutions on the technical side. So for the last couple of minutes, I would like to hear whether you think that we can solve a few of the regulatory challenges, but also address the privacy needs of the users with privacy-enhancing technologies or other measures that can be implemented to maybe lead to more transparency, but especially dial down on the personal data use. Stefanie, shall we start with you? Is that something that has been in the works for you, or is it something that you would like to implement more? Would be great to hear what you think.
Sure. Call me vested, but as an IAB member, of course, I count on the TCF, and there has been some evolution. Just as much as we do evolutions in terms of product development, also the TCF is evoluting all the time. So right now we are in the last couple weeks of getting finalized for the 2.2 version, which is a huge step, I would say. I wish we called it a 3.0. Because a lot of the transparency we talked about, does the user really understand what's asked of him, what's the risk for him, has been tackled in this new version, because you have real life examples. What does that mean when we say we take your data? What kind of data do we talk about, and what could be the conclusion of it? And this in really, hopefully easy enough sentences for people to grasp. But yes, of course, you have to read it once and to understand it. So this burden we can't take away from the user. But yes, I agree with Max. It should be about the user, and I wish we could talk so much more about the user, both on a association level, which we do already, but also with the DPAs and everyone else, to find a good solution with everyone. I saw in the chat someone was writing, privacy is here to stay. Let's make the best of it. And I think this is very, very true.
And talking about the DPAs, Michael Will, is privacy-enhancing technologies also something that is being addressed in your daily work? Is there exchange going on? Are you monitoring how PETs could help, of course, companies, but also maybe make your work a bit easier? Because if you see, I don't know, this and that company is using that kind of technology, I know that it's fine because there are mathematical proofs that, I don't know, that the process is fine. Is that something that gains importance?
Yes, it gains importance, but at the end, I think we are the ones who a little bit stress these privacy-enhancing technologies and try to find out whether they are worth what they are promising. Because only then it's valuable and a stable basis for a company to rely on, and as well the protection data subject gets promised. Nevertheless, if it's done properly, I think this is a little bit of the solution Max is looking for, because my impression is that people need sort of assistant. Many technical colleagues even call these technologies assistant. The people need someone who is transmitting their decisions, their attitude towards privacy when they go online. And I know that there are many discussions about restrictions in browsers and other technologies, but in my opinion, these technologies are the potential for the data subject to get back his control. Because when he starts going online, he has a certain readiness to go some risks or to share his data, and he doesn't want to reflect every time he uses a new product, a new website, to make again this deal. So I think those assistants, those central decisions about giving consent or not, being ready to accept certain legitimate interests would be the game changer. I'm missing some, and I know we discussed and heard about it yesterday, that on our German level we are trying to establish a certain framework for that, but at the end, it should be a European solution. It may work hand in hand with the TCF you mentioned, but for me, for a data subject, the TCF still is too complicated. And when you think about all the data flows behind the TCF, I'm a little bit wondering whether these explanations, when you are as explicit as you should be, are that what a data subject Max is fighting for, and we should fight for too, is really accepting for him as is online experience and the way it should be for him. So this is, for me, the reality in all these discussions about online advertisement. We have established a system which is far too complex to meet the requirements of fairness and transparency, and we should try to find ways to make this easier, like building categories and boxes. This is the ways TCF already began, and I think this should continue.
Okay, so we need to uncomplicate the things. Cecilia, yes. Last words?
Well, actually, I was so much inspired by what Max was saying. So maybe I will say some bullet points regarding reactions that I have when I was listening to him. First, regarding the statistics, I fully agree with him that if the question is posed in the sense that do you like to be tracked or linked to this, I think the natural reaction is tracking, not necessarily. If you are more looking at having a conversation or explaining that, do you like a service that is personalized in the sense of having examples of things that are taking into account their interest and the way in which something could be relevant to them, then the percentages change dramatically. And it makes sense. Otherwise, this kind of business model would have never been successful if really people did not like it. So there is a reason behind. Second, I cannot but agree with Max on this thing that it should be centered in the individual, but this is the whole point of personalization. Personalization means that it is personal to you, that it takes into account your uniqueness, that it takes into account your elements that makes you, that your experience is different from another one. So the proper sense of a personalized service actually cannot be more centered actually in the individual per se. But I think that you are looking for maybe another kind of acceptance as well with respect to this personalization. And thinking of the guardrails and controls that I mentioned before. One of the things that Meta has been developing has been personalization controls in order that actually you really personalize more your level of personalization, if I may say. So users can hide an ad. Users can also hide an advertiser in order not to see the ads. Users can also choose to see fewer or more ads about topics they are less or more interested. Users can also have topic controls with respect to things that they like more or they do not like at all in the platform. Users can also access the data online directly without sending a letter to the DPO and manage their activity and delete things that maybe this kind of information is something that they do not like, to be informing the personalization. And the thing that I mentioned before, there is an opt-in for third-party data. So they need to say, I want to have this kind of data being informed in the personalization in order that these kind of things happen. This is a way to put the individual at the center of the decision with respect to the degree of personalization. Transparency, that you mentioned, Max, that in these statistics, people were feeling that they do not necessarily understand what is happening. It seems very opaque and obscure what is happening behind. Again, there has been efforts that has been made definitely by the company with respect to videos, with respect to waste. Waste is why I'm seeing this. In every single ad, there are 3 points in which you can see what are the signals that have been more relevant for you to receive this ad and not another one. And it is linked to the control preferences in order that you change this if this is not something that you like. And actually, if I may, since it is, I know that it is not German, but it is Austrian, so maybe close. We have one of our litigations was about, of course, the legal basis on the personalized ads. And in this court decision of Austria, they were saying, generating income through personalized advertising made possible by the personal data of Facebook users is explaining the terms of service in a way that is easily understandable to any reader who is even moderately attentive. This model is also neither immoral nor unusual. Finally, the contractual purposes are clearly illustrated in the overall structure of this set of rules, and they go on and on. So not everything is that opaque. There are many ways in which this kind of things can be improved, not only in the terms of use, but also in these other measures that I mentioned before. Finally, pets, privacy-enhanced technologies. This is also something in which this company, and I know that many others, are investing also with respect to the advertising industry. And I think that there will be actually something that, I cannot announce it yet, but definitely there will be more to speak about pets in this area very soon. But I would say that one thing that, if I may have a plea for data protection regulators and policymakers regarding how to encourage pets, is to think about how they assess and how they construe the notion of personal data and anonymization. If everything goes too extreme that nothing could be considered anonymized, this is definitely a deterrent for investing in privacy-enhanced technologies, because the whole point is not necessarily to be on 100% of anonymization, but being in a very low level of re-identification that is appropriate for the relevant context. And this is something that I think is relevant not only for the advertising industry. I was before working in the health industry, and definitely this is extremely important as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cecilia, for this great overview about what the developments also mean for you internally, but also looking at the privacy enhancing technologies, what you are doing. I'm looking forward to the announcements. What I definitely am taking away is that this is a discussion that will be going on for quite some time. I think it's interesting to see the different types of developments in the market regarding alternative models to what we've been seeing in the last 10, 15 years. Max, I think we're all taking away that it is important to be a lot more user focused and looking at what the user really wants and needs and what his pressure points are or critical points are where we need to focus on. when we're trying to solve the problems, because we're trying to solve the users' problems as well. So let's keep the discussion open. Thank you for joining us, and also for giving us your insights, because I think it's always important to bring as many different stakeholders to the table as possible, and seeing how diverse the insights are. It was really great to listen to you and to talk to you today. So dear participants, join me in giving a hand to Michael, Cecilia, Stefanie and Max for this great discussion, and thank you for taking the time. See you soon.